Welcome, Pewter Report readers and listeners, to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. I am John Ledyard, still not suspended from the podcast. Along with me today is also not suspended from the podcast, Matt Matera, with his peach vibe Celsius. And I've got my Fuji Apple Pear Celsius. We will talk briefly about Celsius here in a moment. We've got actually a surprising, we were like, what are we going to talk about a couple hours ago, Matt? And now the headlines are full. Josh Wells is back with the Bucs.
We were planning on just smoking. We were just planning on smoking victory cigars for our winning the bracket and the poll and everything. But yeah, a ton of news to get into now. So this is great.
We had a whiskey and cigars pod lined up for Thursday, which is off the table now because we've got a lot to do. We've got to talk Josh Wells coming back to the Bucs. We've got to talk about Pewter Report being named the top whatever we were in that media poll, Bucs media poll.
Top outlet.
Top outlet, top personality. Did we win? So we beat the top personality. So does that make us both? I don't know.
Right.
Top personalities.
Because last year Scott was also in it as a personality.
Right.
His Twitter handle is Pewter Report. So I had to joke like the final could have been Pewter Report against Pewter Report because it would have been Scott Reynolds.
It could have happened, honestly. That almost did happen.
Doesn't matter. We're the champs. That's all that matters. We're the champs. The Bucs are the champs. Everything is great.
That's true. It is great. What else is great is that Josh Wells is back with the Bucs. Gio Bernard, is he on the table for potential trade to the Bucs? Word on the street is the Bengals could be shopping the longtime running back who is still somehow just 29 years old, as Twitter marveled at today. What else is going on? Larry Fitzgerald, he's still out there as a free agent. That's unfortunate for him if he wants to keep playing, but I don't see what it has to do with the Bucs. We'll talk about that later on the show, and we'll discuss best of the rest. What other free agents are out there that the Bucs could potentially be interested in bringing in? They haven't signed an outside free agent yet. Will they? Don't know. We'll also look at the roster and just see, is there any room for an outside free agent? And that'll all be coming up here on the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. Celsius powers active lives every day with essential functional energy that I am getting currently from my sparkling Fuji Apple Pear, and you are getting from your sparkling limited edition Peach Vibe Celsius. These things are great, man. I'm telling you, healthy energy. They accelerate metabolism, burn body fat. There's no sugar in them, but the taste is unbelievable. There's no letdown in them, but they're an energy drink. There's no letdown after a certain amount of time. Celsius is kind of honestly like a little bit like a cheat code, kind of like Tom Brady when the Bucs got him this cheat code, right? Gronk,
I agree. It's like in the Fast and the Furious when they're in the race and then you hit that NOS button and you just get going.
That's right. Exactly,
but there's not a downfall, which is the best part. You could just keep going and then you're just back to normal after a couple hours later. It's a great drink.
You are talking about something that not only does what you need it to do in terms of giving you a boost, but also taste tremendous. So go over to Celsius.com, check out the store locator, find where you can get them near you. Bucs fans in the chat, drop what you've been drinking lately. Let the people know what Celsius is on your mind. Michael J. Kist, my boy.
I see you.
He loves it. It's out there. So yeah, definitely let us know what you've been drinking Celsius-wise, and we will let you know what we think of your flavors as we go here. But man, that's the sound. If you're listening on the audio version of the podcast later, that's the sound of me rubbing my hands together, because before we talk about Gio Bernard and Larry Fitzgerald, Josh Wells is back with the Bucs, Matt Matera. They continue this incredible offseason of re-signing absolutely everyone that even slightly matters. They really don't have many people left that actually contribute to this team. At this point, I'm just wondering if they're just going to try and see if AQ Shipley wants to be like a player coach, just so they can say they literally re-signed. Well, I guess Andrew Adams and Joe Haig already left, but it's been quite an offseason though. And the Bucs get to bring back Josh Wells as a swing tackle for cheap. And essentially that's what you want when you're paying your top two tackles, or you're going to pay your top two tackles a lot of money. You want to keep bringing in a guy that can play for cheap behind him.
Yeah, I thought earlier today, I was like, wow, are the Bucs going to not only just re-sign everyone that they want to bring back, but also not sign any new free agents strictly on the fact that they don't need anyone from I mean, yes, they could use other players that played for other teams, but they're like throwing almost not a perfect game because Andrew Adams left and Haig left, but they're throwing close to like a no-hitter right now in terms of free agency. And it's just anything that you believe that the Bucs are going to do, whether it's re-signing Ndamukong Suh, signing him because you do an extension with Donovan Smith, anything that you think is going to happen, it just happens. You throw that into the air and the universe sees it and says, okay, Jason Light's going to make ends meet and everything's going to work in the Bucs' favor. It's unbelievable what they've been doing. But for Wells, yeah, it's an important move. I think you've been on the record of saying that he's their most important backup offensive lineman.
Did I say that? I mean, I guess he is now at this point.
I remember reading it somewhere. It was one of our many previews. Or
it was probably Scott. Scott loves all the backups, man. He thinks Blaine Gabbert's the next Brady. So it was probably Scott.
Hey, you never know.
I know it's true. Hey, Craig says, and that's funny. I said what you've been drinking. I was meaning Celsius, but Craig says he's been drinking Wild Turkey. So good for Craig.
Wild Turkey neat. They always order that in The Sopranos. If there's any Sopranos fans here in the chat, especially Bobby Bacala, he always gets Wild Turkey neat. That's just a fun fact. I love the show.
I'm just saying Celsius, a little bit of Wild Turkey. I mean, it could be a good mix. I mean, I had a little game day vodka, a little Celsius mix. I mean, that's
no more vodka Red Bull. It's vodka Celsius.
Right. I'm telling you. There you go. Bucs Fran says, can't wait to drink Celsius for the first tailgate at RJ of next season. That'll be a good time to break it out there. Try some beforehand too if you want.
It'll be a Thursday night too. It'll be a Thursday night. That's Super Bowl champs.
That's true. So we've got this situation with Wells now coming back where, Matt, one of the things we'll have to talk about with this roster is what the heck do they actually need? Like, where else is there even space on the roster for other people, especially if you do get AB and Leonard Fournette back? Where's there even space on the roster for other signings? So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about a potential trade at one spot where we know, Matt, that there could be an opening is at running back. Even if Leonard Fournette is back, this is still an incomplete backfield probably at that point in time. They could wait until the draft, sure, if Leonard Fournette's re-signed. But again, I'm just looking at this room and I'm like, if Leonard Fournette's back, you really have to upgrade the receiving role out of the backfield, the pass protection role out of the backfield. And who better to do it than a guy like Gio Bernard, who from the Bengals, who was reported earlier today. Who said it? Was it Tom Pelissero? I can't remember now. Let me look. They said Gio Bernard could be available via trade. And I was like, oh, the Bucs should be all over this. Who was it that said it? Do you remember?
I remember everyone talking about it. And that's the problem is like.
It was Tom Pelissero. I was right.
Was it? Okay.
Yes. He said multiple teams have called to inquire about Bengals running back Giovanni Bernard. Per source, barring a restructured contract, Bernard, one of the NFL's top receiving backs and still only 29, could be headed elsewhere. It's possible. He didn't say the Bengals were shopping him. He said other teams are calling him. I'm stunned that Giovanni Bernard has not been traded before this the point in time. I mean, the Bengals have not been good for a long time, and I just feel like he's kind of an answer piece other teams be interested in. They need resources. But you have to remember, the Bengals don't really do things that make sense as an organization, especially when it's come to rebuilding and retooling their roster. So just because Tom Pelissero is saying this does not mean the Bengals will actually trade Gio Bernard. They have done this many, many times before where there's been interest in a player, they've had trade off a player, and they just said, nah. Like, they are the weirdest run team in the league. I mean, bar none.
Right. And it's like, what even would be the trade value for Giovanni Bernard? I mean, I would think it's something like just a late round pick. Maybe the Bucs throw that comp pick that they recently got for Giovanni Bernard. Yeah. I mean, I don't think is a team going to give up a 4th round pick for him? I highly doubt it, unless you think he's like the missing piece to winning a Super Bowl, which, no offense to him, I don't really think any team is a Giovanni Bernard away from winning a Super Bowl.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's a good point. It's why the Bengals not trading their highest value is another just completely, they have no foresight as an organization. But I mean, what are you going to get? Look at this guy. Look at this man. I mean, look at that stash. That man is going to get,
that might be number one on the
box. He might fetch a third. He might fetch a third with that stash, man.
That's true. Awesome. When you put in that factor, it definitely bumps him up a draft pick. Absolutely.
But one of the things, though, I like about Gio Bernard as a potential fit with the Bucs, though, is that he's a good receiver for sure, and he can make people miss as a receiver. He's accomplished in that role. He's not a guy that is going to take over feature responsibilities or even really push for that at this point in his career, but he will fill a role for you and will do it well. And if you need him to rush for a game, he can do that too. He's done that effectively just fine throughout his career. Again, I wouldn't pay him as a feature back or anything like that, but he's fine in that regard too. But mainly, yes, a pass catcher. I mean, he's 342 receptions in his career for almost 3,000 yards. He's averaged of his career 8.4 yards per catch. So, I mean, he's productive for a running back in 2 yards per catch. And he's been consistently productive throughout his career too. 11 touchdowns receiving in his career. But one of the things that really stands out to me the most about him is pass protection. He's been one of the best pass protecting backs for years. That's a big reason why Cincinnati has wanted to part ways with him, is that he still stands out in that regard. And that's something the Bucs obviously really need.
Right, and that's something Bruce Arians talks about all the time. I mean, we've mentioned in the past that Ronald Jones has gotten benched because he's not able to pass protect. And this is a guy that, when Bernard's in the game, it's more than likely going to be a pass play. But as you said, he does have experience being a starter. Mostly it was because the starting running back was out, but that experience helps. Even looking back at last season, and I think there's something to be said about a player like Bernard that's on a team like the Bengals that just, they've made the postseason in the past, but they haven't won a postseason game in a very, very long time. I think there's something to be said about a player that's on a team that is just so battered and beaten down. You go to a new team, let's say hypothetically goes to the Bucs. That guy's going to be even more inspired than he's probably ever been in his career because he's finally with the winner. And even on a team like the Bengals last season, where there was some inspiration with Joe Burrow there until he got hurt and was out for the rest of the season. So we bounced around with a couple different quarterbacks. But even with that, he had 355 receiving yards on 47 catches compared to Ronald Jones. I believe he had 165 receiving yards. So that's a guy you could plug in right away. And obviously Jones is splitting with Leonard Fournette, and obviously they moved around with different third down running backs. But I mean, we talked about it a ton. It'd just be so key if the Bucs can just have one guy they could totally rely on, and you don't have to get a little worried when it's a third down. And because Brady loves dumping off the ball to a running back. And I don't think we even totally saw that last season, because I'm not saying it's because of a trust thing, but it's because you knew you weren't going to get the maximum potential you could in the past, that what you've seen with Brady throwing to a running back, until Leonard Fournette really stepped up his game in the postseason. So I think Bernard would be an absolutely a great fit if somehow the Bucs could make that work.
Yeah, definitely would be. Edward asked a good question. If the Bucs sign him, am I going to grow the stash? I probably will not because I wouldn't try to or do it for the fans, but I think that my wife would probably leave me if I grew the stash. I've done the stash as a joke before, and it's not gone well. Let me tell you. So probably would not be the move for me, although I appreciate the fact that you thought of that, because it would be very funny. Jack wants to know, John, I'm confused. Bernard is a bad runner. He's bad. He's terrible. Just kidding. He wasn't used as a third down back in Cincinnati. His third down conversion when given the ball is low, and he seems more like a running back that can catch, not a receiving back. There's an interesting distinction in the last part of Jack's question that's true. Running backs that can catch versus running backs that are receiving backs that actually like line up in the slot, run routes, things like that. He isn't that, I don't think, but he is a running back that can catch. If you watch the Bucs last year, that was hard to come by. Just a running back that could purely catch and get upfield. He's smart in the open field. He is not an explosive, Alvin Kamara type player. There's nothing like that in Gio Bernard. I mean, I think we know what we're paying for here. That's why he's probably a 5th round pick, and a contract restructure. He knows he'd be taking the less money. I saw some people talking about the cap hit. I wouldn't worry about that, because what Pelissero was referencing is the team's really interested if there's a restructure. So,
and would this be
right.
Sorry.
I mean, exactly right. But you're right. That would be what would have to happen. Yeah, there was no way he'd be getting paid that amount, or the Bengals end up releasing him, and then he just, maybe that's the route he ends up going. Again, this doesn't saying, this is likely to happen. We're just saying, should it happen, or should the Bucs look into it? Is it a good fit? I think all of those things are true. The other thing, Jack, that you didn't mention was his pass protection skills, and that's where, again, I think he upgrades. So Bernard would be like a piece of the puzzle. At this point, you're looking for a piece of the puzzle. If you're not drafting or running one of the top 3 backs in the class, you're going to do it. It's going to be patchwork again. And so right now we want to have that in place so that then when the draft comes, everything you do there is a luxury. And so maybe bring Leonard back is enough to do that. I don't think Leonard and Bernard, obviously, but if Leonard doesn't come back, Bernard's a good option. Ronald Jones can be feature guy. You draft somebody. Bernard can be a change of pace guy. He can catch the ball. And then you see what happens with Keyshawn Vaughn. My thing with Keyshawn Vaughn has stayed the same. And I don't know if you agree, Matt, but I'd like to have him on the roster. You just cannot count on Keyshawn Vaughn to be one of your top backs next year. If you're going to do a rotation deal, you can't count on him to be one of those guys, in my opinion. I just don't think that's gonna work in your favor. It might end up working out, but it's not a smart plan to kind of go into the season that way.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't put all your trust and hope that Keyshawn Vaughn is going to, quote unquote, figure it out or take the next step. What I will say, though, is I think he's really going to be a guy that's going to benefit from actually having a full training camp and a preseason this year. Because in that fourth preseason game, in the first two, he's going to get a ton of reps and more reps than he probably ever got. I don't want to say in practice, but like clearly in a game or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I think just learning Bruce Arians' offense, which isn't the easiest to, totally formulate for new guys coming into the league. I think for him, just getting all of those reps, and remember he had COVID last season too, where he was on COVID protocol, so he missed time with that as well. I think I don't want to say he's a wild card because that's not the right term, but he's an optimistic question mark, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
If he doesn't pan out, then obviously you have a backup plan with either Fournette or another free agent running back that comes in, and they're probably going to draft one. But if he exceeds expectations, then he's a guy that, you're set for, and we don't have to get too far into the future because we're not even into next season yet, but he's a guy down the road too that you wouldn't have to worry about signing another veteran free agent running back because you can count on Keyshawn Vaughn. So I think preseason to I guess in summation of what I'm trying to say is preseason is really going to be a big, big time for Keyshawn Vaughn to prove, because he's going to have competition with the rookie running back that's coming in. So it's a big time for him right now. Right.
And Michael Henderson says, why trade anything for mediocrity? Because you likely to get mediocrity in the fifth round. Any stat will show you that. So if you trade a pick for something that's proven, it's a great move. I don't understand why more teams don't do it. Your percentage chance of hitting on a day 3 pick is low. And I'm not saying this is the MO for that situation. Like this is what has to happen in this situation. I'm just saying in general, it's not a pick that you have to ask yourself, are you more likely to get a player this good even for a year or two at this pick? Probably not, So I think that's part of the equation, obviously. But at the same time, I mean, that's doesn't mean they should do it for Bernard or anything like that. But I do think there's an interesting potential fit there. Somebody asks, is Rex Burkhead still an option? Yes, I think he's still an option. He's probably one of the few good options out there for the Bucs because, again, pass protection matters. You're looking for a guy that's going to fill a role at this point. If you're going to fill a role, you need to have something that you can hang your hat on, and that's what Burkhead has with pass protection. So that's
I wouldn't mind him in like a goal line situation too. Obviously, Rojo can get it done, but if he needs a break, I wouldn't mind Burkhead in a goal line situation.
Did he get the Jets in the goal line? Did he get them a few times?
I mean, a lot of people got the Jets at the goal line. It's just Rex Burkhead, but
I'm keeping track.
I think he would be solid there at the goal line, though, and obviously, if you play for the Patriots and you're running back, you're going to be able to make receptions and things like that. God bless you. For those listening, John just sneezed.
Well, I muted the mic. You didn't hear that, right? I muted it.
No, I saw
Okay,
it.
You saw. Okay, all right. Making sure the
mute. It would have been rude if I didn't say anything.
No, I appreciate it. No, I think you're right about Bernard. But the other guy that people have asked about in the chat and people have asked about on Twitter too, and I get it because it's a name, but oh my goodness. Le'Veon Bell. You would be literally taking Le'Veon Bell just for pass protection at this point. Can
you imagine if him and Antonio Brown are in the same locker room again?
Oh, my God. They were really good friends in Pittsburgh. Then I think Bell kind of criticized AB, and they might have had some falling out. I don't think they've stayed in touch.
Two rappers as well. They both That's right. I think Bell has an album, and obviously AB has that song.
AB dabbles.
Yeah. And you get some freestyles going on in the locker room.
Yeah, well, I just think Bell's cooked. I just really do. I don't think there's anything left there. Wouldn't surprise me if he's not in the league. He'll probably be to me, I would guess he's an in-season ad for somebody when somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
It's crazy how fast it goes, man, but he just doesn't. I mean, even as phase out in a role like that, but he was a great pass protector in Pittsburgh, though. Probably one of the best pass protecting backs I've ever seen. So maybe I'd have to look at last year's. I mean, you might know better than me, but was there any way that he stood out with the Jets? I mean, even when he got chances,
a very solid receiver. I remember his first year, the Jets had no offense at all. They were playing the Bills, and the Jets had defensively they got 3 turnovers and got I think 6 points out of it or something like that. But they finally scored a touchdown, and it was a pass to Le'Veon Bell. Then he got hurt though, and that kind of like derailed everything else. But I mean, yeah, you talk about the passing game, very solid pass catcher. I always found him so interesting because he was such a patient running back. Like he would get obviously you know this, but he would like get the handoff and then he would wait for the holes to open up and then he would hit it versus like every other running back just goes straight at it. I always found that so fascinating about him.
He's very unique style, and the fact that it worked over and over again in Pittsburgh for a couple of years there at least was very impressive. I just am laughing inside because I'm imagining Bucs fans, even some who are asking about the move now, when they actually watched Bell. When they actually watched Bell, like compared to the backs they have now, they would just be furious because the backs now, at least how many times have they been dropped for a loss? Like even not very often. It's the one thing you could count on the Bucs backs this season. They weren't going to waste a lot of time beyond the line of scrimmage. They were going to run right into the first defender as fast as they could.
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't get that with Bell. You would get a ton of stop, lateral movement, stop, shake, stop, juke. They would just be furious. As soon as he lost 3 yards and put the offense in second, 13, it's like, put Ronald Jones in there. He'll run as hard as he can directly in a straight line. But no, I just don't think Bell has much left in the tank, to be honest with you. I think that this is the end for him, to be honest. And so I really wish that his career would have gone differently than it did. I think that year off, he just never came back the same player. I don't know why. He did have injuries before that, so maybe, it caught up with him. At running backs, it's hard to figure out, but he just really, when he was with Kansas City, it just was, that wasn't like a great backfield, right? Like,
no,
that's a backfield you should have been able to, like, if you had something left in the tank, you should have been able to, like.
Especially because they had guys hurt too. So he would have been, at least for a little bit, the primary running back and just never, and then he got hurt as well, I think. So it just, it never worked out. And I don't know. It's unfortunate to see because he was so talented, and I hate seeing really good players have like a significant decline, especially for guys that haven't won a championship yet and things like that. I always feel for them.
Right, I agree. Another guy that I think is washed is Larry Fitzgerald.
As I was saying, all right, this is a good segue for your boy.
Larry. I don't get it. Why are we talking about Larry? I know why. It's because it's literally the most surface level thing, right? The Bucs. He was with Arians before.
It's easy to connect the dots.
It's easy to connect the dots, but it's so ridiculous. Like Larry Fitzgerald would be so redundant on this team. They already have. If you even think he has something left in the tank, which is point number 2, honestly, at this point, he's literally like what Godwin and Tyler Johnson already bring to the offense. And I know people are like, oh, he could play that role. Well, what would he be? Why would you want to give Larry Fitzgerald snaps over Tyler Johnson? Like at this point in their career, it doesn't make any sense. So you're going to have Larry Fitzgerald be your last receiver, and then he's going to play special teams all of a sudden?
He's not going to play special teams.
Right. So when's he active? How, like, it just doesn't make sense. He can't play on the outside anymore like he used to. He can't play inside, to be honest. Like he's done. He just needs to retire, and he's out snowboarding somewhere now on a trip, and good for him. And I love Larry. I think he's had a great career, but it just is what it is at this point in time. Like, he doesn't offer the team anything. And people compare him to AB, and we had this conversation with Scott earlier today, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, AB – right. If you get the character thing,
because I think it's got to be dissected, this question / argument. If it's like, would you rather have Larry Fitzgerald or Antonio Brown for the same exact price? It's obviously Antonio Brown. You would be insane to be like, no, Larry Fitzgerald, he's the better fit. Obviously, what comes into play is like Larry Fitzgerald is one of the greatest human beings of all time versus everything that we've spoken about already with Antonio Brown and his issues. But I think where some people might look at it is, okay, if the Bucs can't get Antonio Brown, should they go after Larry Fitzgerald because it makes sense for A, B, and C with knowing Bruce Arians and the coaching staff? Even then, I don't necessarily hate it, but at that point, I would rather, if you're not going to get Larry Fitzgerald, if you're not going to get Antonio Brown, I would rather the Bucs not even sign another receiver and just go with, having Scotty Miller as your guy and having Tyler Johnson. Because obviously we know what Scotty Miller can do. He's great down the field. He's always going to be that vertical threat. And Tyler Johnson, I think the really exciting thing about him is he was only a rookie last year, obviously, and he had flashes of good plays where you're like, okay, I can build on top of that. Oh, yeah. And I think especially a middle round pick like Tyler Johnson was, that's all you can ask for, especially when you have a team that already has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. You don't need Tyler Johnson to be the number one guy, but you saw flashes where he made important plays for this team, and I think that's great. So as cool as it would be to have Larry Fitzgerald there, and there's certain things I guess he could do for the team. He had more receptions last season than Scotty Miller. Now, obviously, Scotty Miller had way more of an impact for the Bucs than Larry Fitzgerald did for the Cardinals. But if someone wanted to make that argument, I guess.
Yeah, well, in that Cardinals offense, remember that Cardinals offense is like, take the snap and throw the ball type of offense.
Yes, that's true.
They just force fed him, which is a big reason why their offense, frankly, wasn't very productive at certain points of the season. Is they're force feeding a guy who didn't do anything with the ball when he got it. They were force feeding that guy touches. It was a very weird approach, and but we digress there. And just to say that Fitzgerald, I just think again, I think he's done regardless. But even if he isn't, the Bucs are one of the worst fits for him in my mind. Even though he said just because of who they have already, it just doesn't make any sense. And AB, if he comes back, obviously he's superior to Fitzgerald in almost every way that matters, except for blocking. And even then, it's like, well, what would you rather have? If Chris Godwin and Tyler Johnson go down, would you rather have a guy that make plays down the field and can make plays with the ball in his hands and can separate and get open, or would you rather have a guy that can block as your other receiver? I'd rather have Antonio Brown in a situation like that. And so I respect Larry Fitzgerald a ton. I think it's very sentimental to want him in Tampa Bay right now. I don't see that as a move that makes sense for either side, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, Antonio Brown is an all-time talent. And I think, too, a lot of times with any big name player that automatically becomes a free agent, or I guess in Larry's situation, he could pretty much, if he wants to keep playing, like there's a team that would want him. But anytime there's a big name that's a possibility, but like people are always like, oh, he should go to the Bucs. It happened years ago when they weren't good, and even up until like 2 years ago. And you see it now that the Super Bowl champs, like they can do anything, really. Anything is possible. So I think people just like to attach big names to teams that are successful. And
in some ways, I kind of get it. Like, I mean, I was kind of like, the Leonard Fournette and AB thing didn't make much sense to me last year. And, you can argue
we've seen it happen now. Where
that's right. So now it makes it harder for
the
people.
Bucs, and wham, now Gronk is on the Bucs. Oh, Antonio Brown should go to the Bucs. Now he's on the Bucs. I just remember like a couple years ago, going back to Le'Veon Bell, it was like Le'Veon Bell should definitely go to the Bucs. Tyrann Mathieu should definitely go to the Bucs. Patrick Peterson should definitely go to the Bucs. It's like, all right, big name, I get it. Ideally, it would be cool. And now we're seeing the quote unquote Madden team, as I said, with Gronk and Leonard Fournette, and so I don't know. It's mixed up everything in this world.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of thrown everybody's sense of reality off, right? Like maybe this is possible. Maybe all these things make sense, but at some point, LaShawn McCoy to draw the line at some point.
Terrell Owens is going to somehow be linked to the Bucs.
He would be more productive than Larry Fitzgerald for the Bucs if they both suited up.
Let's into existence now. T.O. is going to go to the Bucs.
Ocho Cinco's always talking about how he's still healthy and ready to go. So, no, I think that this is a team in the Bucs that's pretty much set, and that makes the next part of this tricky, Matt. Like, where the heck did this team go for a free agent if they won't? Everybody's like, I just want to see one outside guy come in. I think part of it's just the fun, like somebody new, like how does he fit? And obviously they're one of just maybe 3 teams that haven't signed an outside free agent at all right now. And Jack says, John, don't forget we are trading for OBJ. That's
of course,
true.
yes.
Trading for OBJ. We should go through all. There's probably more scenarios I've forgotten about now at this point, but that is one of the things that is so tricky about trying to figure out. Okay, let's say that Blaine Gabbert and Ryan Griffin are back as expected. Quarterback's out of the question, right? You're not signing a quarterback. Wide receiver. Let's say AB's back as we expect him to be, especially at this point in time. Somebody said, by the way, to Seattle, I don't know if it was Pat McAfee talking about what Diana Rossini said, or if it was Diana Rossini who said, or if Pat McAfee was conjecturing on what Rossini was reporting. She was reporting about the ongoing tension between Russell Wilson and Seattle. And he mentioned that, I don't know if he was saying she said it or if he was just saying it, but he said he doesn't think Antonio Brown's going to go to Seattle. If that's the case, and if that's true, that really takes, I don't know who would sign it. I mean, because the teams that would be like interested in a risk like that, the Bills are off after that whole debacle. Patriots are off the table, I would guess. Seattle, that would take them off the table. So again, I don't know where the market comes for AB. So let's say AB's back. you've got what? Godwin, Evans, AB, Miller, Johnson. Your 6th receiver is going to be a special teamer, a young guy, a return guy. Could be Mickens, could be Justin Watson, but that's not somebody you're signing for age. You're going to draft a guy. They're all going to battle it out. It's going to be great fun. That kind of a deal. Like, that's what's going to happen. So no wide receivers. Cam Brate's still on the roster. We'll see if Anthony O'Clair comes back.
You don't need tight end, obviously, if Cam Brate's still going to be there.
That's right. So there's no tight end need right now. They brought back Josh Wells and Aaron Stinney. Joe Haig left. I think interior offensive line's an option. A veteran center.
I wouldn't hate if they got one more, but again, like, that's where the draft comes into play. And obviously, I think one of the big options they could do there is draft a future, maybe a future starting, but at least a key backup offensive lineman there. I really look at, honestly, I think the 2 positions they could really look at in free agency is running back, which obviously we already talked about. And, they could still use a veteran corner out there. I mean, when is Ross Cockrell coming back?
Right. Yeah. I think you're exactly right. On offense, it's hard to find, but I do think center is one. I want to say that they brought in AQ Shipley last year. They didn't feel like they had anybody that could snap or they count on. Yeah. That's the one position I wouldn't be super surprised. There's a lot of veteran centers out there you can sign for $1 million. And I wouldn't be super surprised if they went out and signed somebody like that. And then they draft another guy, or maybe they feel like John Molson's ready for a center role. They liked him last year. We'll see what happens. But right now, I mean, Aaron Stinney, I don't know that he has any snapping experience. He definitely wasn't working at center last year, but they don't really have backup center. And that was definitely something they prioritized and looked for before the season. So I would imagine that will still be on the radar. They could wait until after the draft too, like they did with Shipley. Plenty of options out there to look into. But that's really it on offense, right? Like, I don't know that they would go.
Yeah,
remember, Brad Seaton's coming back too.
They dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's. They did their due diligence there. You know, there's not really too many. Not really too many
running back.
And
running back. But if Leonard comes back, I mean, that's it, probably, right?
Yeah, and then you're good to go. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Like you don't need to address something where it's like, we already got that covered. But like, I know we like to talk about flooding the position, but again, as I said, that's where the draft comes into play. You don't need to spend for someone if you don't have to, Right. Exactly right. So I think that at that point in time, you look at, okay, let's back, AB's back, wide receiver's good, running back good, and this is until the draft, by the way. We're set at running back until the draft. We're set at wide receiver until the draft. Center could be a possibility. And then you talked about defensive line. Right now, what are they? 5 deep, counting Khalil Davis on defensive line. You got Pat O'Connor coming back too. So you have still McClendon up in the air. Let's say he retires just for the sake of the argument. Maybe a backup nose tackle. Nacho could play that role, but they brought in McClendon for a reason, right? Again, A.Q. Shipley-like situation. They thought we need another veteran guy here. Mike Pennell has been a good nose tackle throughout his career. He could be an option, I think, that's still out there on the market as far as I haven't seen him sign with anyone. Run stuffer will be cheap, older, looking to ride out on a high note probably. He could be a guy that I think that they could be interested in signing. Again, just depth on the defensive line. Guys get hurt, you're ready to go. Linebacker, I think it's more likely to be a rookie, right? Like they have the older veteran special teamer and Minter and you already have the main 3. I mean, Levante, Devin White, they're never going to come off the field. So obviously, hopefully they're healthy. And then Kevin Minter, I'm very confident if he has to play in a starting role, I'm quite confident that he can do it. So then it pretty much just comes down to
number 4 corner.
And
number 5 too. We'll see if Ryan Smith comes back. Nothing's happened with him yet. And Herb's still around. Herb. So you got Herb.
Yeah, and I think the corner thing is so interesting too because everyone's going to say bring back Ross Cockrell, and I'm in that party as well too. You should bring him back. Eventually, I feel like with the second defensive backs in general, I think is the number 1 position in football where it's like, okay, if there's gonna be an injury, they always talk about like taking a guy off the street or whatever, and I always felt like defensive back is like that number 1 position. So it's like, okay, well, if you don't bring back Ross Cockrell, who again played above average, is there really a guy specifically that you're like, oh, I think he's a really good fit for the Bucs defense to be like a number 4 corner? At that point, I think it's more just like, oh, okay, this guy's been in the league, like he had a good season in like 2015 or something like that. Let's give him a shot there. But I don't think anyone at this point in free agency, like obviously Richard Sherman's out there, but I don't think he's going to come to the Bucs. I think it's pretty clear cut not to bring up my Jets, but it seems like he's going to go to the Jets and go back with Saleh. But everyone else,
really? Is that the direction things are heading with Richard Sherman back to the Jets?
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. But
is Sherman going back to the Jets?
Well, he's never played for the Jets.
Or going to the Jets, going back to Saleh.
I've seen some things that kind of link them together, and it would make sense. I mean, at this point in his career, he's more of just some people say he's still got a little gas left in the tank, but I don't think anyone would really sign him to be like the number one guy on a team. But he'd
be the number one guy on the Jets, right?
He's an emotional guy, he gets the people going. You know what would bother me about that though is because like him and Darrelle Revis have such beef, and like I'm a huge Darrelle Revis guy. I would hate to see him like be on Darrelle Revis' team, but that's a story for another day. Tampa Bay Buccaneer, great Darrelle Revis.
I would love to have Sherman in Tampa Bay, but that is not happening.
I think it would be cool,
right? Because it's like he's still going to start, and then who do you? I mean, again, I don't mind. I think he's better than Jamal Dean or Sean Murphy-Bunting, but the Bucs invested in him for a reason, and they both took a step. Especially toward the end of the season last year, I'm sure the Bucs are want to plan to have those guys play. So I think the number 4 corner is more likely to be somebody who is like a Ross Cockrell or Herb Miller type.
Yeah.
Now Herb could be ready for the number 4 role if it happens. So we'll have to see how things play out with Ross Cockrell. He's a guy that's waited late a couple times before, I think, in his career to sign.
Yeah.
So that could be the case again. We could be looking at that situation with him and with AB, to be honest. AB's got that December court date. I don't know if he's got anything before that point or whatever, but I do think that could be something that you're looking for with him. Is you could be a longer wait than we expect with those guys, especially if there's no market for AB. The Bucs might not want to commit to anything until they get closer to the season.
It's not really a huge rush right now.
Right.
There's not a huge rush. And I think Mark was talking about this on the podcast the other day. There's different waves of free agency, and we're kind of on like in between the second and third one right now. And then the next one comes right around training camp. So, I mean, this could be a question that we're talking about now that doesn't get answered until, August, which is fine because everyone has time right now. Yeah,
I agree. We could be. I think Leonard's situation will get resolved earlier, but I don't think. AB's could be a longer term. We just don't know. His whole situation, as every cap expert that we've had on here has said, his whole situation is just pretty odd with AB. There's nothing standard or straightforward about it. So we have defensive tackle, potentially defensive tackle, a nose tackle type, a run stuffer type of defensive tackle, maybe. We have potentially a center. And this is if Leonard and AB come back. Number 4 corner, possibility for the team to be able to add. Safety, maybe, but I think Javon Hagan, they liked his special teams last year in camp. I think they want to see him step into the number 4 role. And is Dakota Dixon still around? What's up with that dude? Do you remember?
He had some really good training camps.
Yeah, they liked him as a special teamer.
That was a guy that Bruce Arians was pretty high on.
That's
too.
Right.
So I mean,
I don't remember if he's still around or not. I literally can't remember what happened.
I'm not sure what his situation is right now, but I mean, if he popped
somebody
up,
look it up.
Campus, I wouldn't.
Somebody look it up and let us know where Dakota Dixon's at. We don't remember. We're the professionals.
I believe he went to Wisconsin. I'm like,
he did.
So. Shout out to the Wisconsin crowd, because anytime at training camp when a guy like when Jack Sitchy would make a play or Dakota Dixon, the Wisconsin crowd gets hyped when their college football players turned NFL players make plays. Because I'm telling you, when I would post a video or something of that player making a play, it would instantly get like a ton of views, all from like Wisconsin football accounts and stuff like that. So shout out to the Wisconsin football program, because they really rep hard for their guys when they make it to the NFL.
That's true, they do, and hardly any of their guys go early too. So that's why they, I think, root for them so hard, is because they stayed the whole time at Wisconsin. And the fans love that. So, but yeah, Dakota Dixon, I remember because I think Trevor back when I was in Lockdown NFL Draft, I think Trevor gave him like a second round grade the day before the draft or something, just because he loved his story so much. We knew he wasn't going to go until like late in the draft, but Trevor just fell in love with the dude. He was like, dude, he's going to make it. He's a stud. So I hope he comes back to the Bucs. Ren says he was cut from the practice squad.
Not to cut you off, but happy birthday, Trevor. It is Trevor's birthday today.
Happy birthday. Shout out to the GOAT, Sycamore. Ren says that Dakota was cut from the practice squad. I remembered that, but then I thought he came back, but I could be, or went to injured reserve or something. I don't remember how. But he's not anywhere right now. So he might come back for camp. We'll see. But I think one of those guys, somebody like that, or a guy they draft, he's going to be the 4th safety. I don't think they sign anybody for that. So last spot, edge defender. That's the spot, right? This is the spot, man. There's like 50 veterans out there, Matt. They're just dying for a shot at a ring. Bring one of these guys in, Justin Houston or Ryan Kerrigan. You can't go into the season with Anthony Nelson, and you can't count on getting a rookie necessarily. And
Yeah, see, that's the issue with some of these positions. I'm just like, okay, they'll address this in the draft. They'll address that in the draft.
Picking 32.
Yeah, I know.
It's trickier. But you're right. I mean, if they went into the draft, it's not the end of the world if it was a rookie and Anthony Nelson is the backups next season. Obviously, if somebody gets hurt, you're in trouble. They were lucky. But JPP and Shaq played every game last year, right? So it is something that, I mean, that's the thing, dude. That's what Scott and I always talk about. If situation could get bleak quickly because they just don't have another pass rusher. After
honestly, there's a lot of names still out there at edge rusher that
plenty of names. Yeah, plenty of names. Some of them are cooked, but some of them, I mean, legitimately could still give you, like, I mean, I don't know if Ryan Kerrigan's looking to start, but some of them could legitimately give you, pretty decent reps, I think, still. So another place you'll get some pretty decent reps out of several people in this chat is on Locker Room. Locker Room is changing the way we talk sports. It's the only place for live audio conversations about the takes, rumors, news, and teams you care about. As many people in this chat know, who jump into the locker rooms that we do on a regular basis. We react to sports news as it happens. We gather all our friends and watch parties for the biggest games. You can rep your favorite teams, find your community. Bucs fans, you found that community with us at Pewter Report. Better sports talk is just a tap away. Download on the Apple App Store and join the conversation on Locker Room. Lots of cool conversations happening on Locker Room right now, because even if you're a Bucs fan, there are NFL draft conversations happening right now in Locker Room that can educate you about a lot of these prospects with a lot of good analysts out there. So download Locker Room, join the app, follow Pewter Report, look around for some other good personalities. There are plenty on there that are giving some good information. I know personally when I do my Bucs briefing, kind of usually on Tuesday nights, when I do my Locker Room session, and you can ask Ren and you can ask Jack, who are in the chat, and some other people, if I give away a few tidbits here and there that I don't necessarily give away on the pod and stuff to our little small group that's in there, they get to hear some stuff not everybody else hears. So it's cool stuff. So download Locker Room, follow Pewter Report, and you'll get invited to those rooms when those locker rooms open. You'll get an invite to them. So good stuff. We've kind of gone through the situation for the Bucs. They may sign an outside free agent, but the options are very limited, not just because of the cap space, but really more than anything, it's because of the fact that they just don't need that many things. This is a pretty complete team, Matt. There's not a lot of holes, and we'll see what happens in the coming days with AB and Leonard Fournette and Blaine Gabbert, Ross Cockrell, even Steve McClendon, but we're running out of questions, and we've got a lot of answers, and they're looking pretty good for the Bucs. They could literally return this whole team at this point. It's pretty wild.
Right now, it's champagne problems for the Bucs.
That's right. It really is. It's been that kind of an offseason. So it's been fun stuff. The Bucs are kind of recalibrating themselves for another run. We'll continue to look at free agents as it happens, but next week especially, we will heavily turn our attention to the draft on this podcast, no matter what's happened with AB and Leonard. We have waited it out for those guys. We'll see what ends up happening with them, but we will wait no longer. We move forward next week. We are very draft focused. UNC's Pro Day, I believe, is tomorrow. There's a couple different dates listed for it. Hopefully it's tomorrow because I'm showing up for a media session, a virtual media session at 4 tomorrow. So we will talk about Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, their Pro Day performances. We'll talk about that on Monday. We'll also get to talk to those guys, hopefully, Lord willing, ask them some questions, see if they have met with the Bucs at all, things of that nature. So we'll discuss that with those guys tomorrow, hopefully, if it is tomorrow. And also, some reports say that it's Monday, the Pro Day. So I emailed the NFL to find out when it is. But either way, Monday is Miami's Pro Day as well. So Jalen Phillips, Quincy Roche, Gregory Russo, who a lot of people, they've put those three in the conversation with the Bucs at some point in time. That's on Monday. I'm trying to remember what other ones were on Monday. There's a bunch of Pro Days that have Bucs players that have been heavily linked to the Bucs on Monday. And on Tuesday as well. I think Alabama has their second Pro Day on Tuesday. I don't know if Najee Harris is going to run or not. What else? Mac Jones will throw again, I think. Washington, I believe, is on Tuesday. Joe Tryon, Levi Onwuzurike. East Carolina with Deontay Smith, who we've talked about a lot to the Bucs, is on that day too. So we'll be in a lot of these. We'll be talking to them about whether they met with the Bucs. We'll talk heavily NFL draft. Next week, we'll get into my edge rankings at some point next week. Those are going to come out once Miami's Pro Day is over and Washington's Pro Day is over, and I get some of the results that I need to finalize the grades there. Those will be out like Wednesday or Thursday probably, so we'll talk about them on one of those shows. Going to be a fun week, as always. So we appreciate you all. For Matt Matera, I'm John Ledyard. Thanks so much for joining us on another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.
We're the champs. Out.